the miracle in the last year and a half for me with coaching with WEL-Systems and the programs is that Stella said it actually on the last interview, calibrating the nervous system for safety. And I was like, what? Calibrating the nervous system for safety? Like, oh my God. I had no calibration in my nervous system for safety. Mm. And that's what's happened. So that now the safety part is so legitimately there that when all the fear comes, I'm able to see something else or feel something else, to, like, as I talked about it last time, hear the silence that's there in the background, which is, the essence of who we are, and choose that. So it's been a long road to be able to do that. And I have to say to anybody out there who has OCD type behaviors, yes, it felt always impossible to do. Mm-hmm. Because it's big. Yeah.
Thank you, Randi. Wow, what a start. It's like all my questions, you already went through it. So that's pretty awesome. Hello and welcome to Sparking the Sacred. My name is Stella Moresi, and I'm delighted that you're choosing to join me in these enlivening and radical conversations about just what it takes to liberate ourselves from the confines of our mind, history, and upbringing, and in the process, embrace our most magnificent, boundless leader selves. Let's dive in. So good morning, Randi.
Good morning, Stella.
So we're back at this very quickly after our previous interview, just like we said we would be. Because of that sense of excitement that you brought to the table about this particular topic and the impact that it has had in your life, the impact that it has in other people's lives, and the difference of what's possible that people may or may not yet be aware of. And that's what we're here to have a chat about. So what I want to do is I want you to first and foremost maybe introduce yourself, how you would like to be known. And then we'll delve into our topic, which is around this notion, this nominalization, this quote unquote disease of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and whatever else comes our way. So over to you.
So, my name is Randi White. I'm 64. I live in Montreal. I've been in every kind of therapy since 17 years old, and with a lot of different diagnoses, one of which is OCD, which, it means a huge amount to me to speak to this topic today, because it's there's a lot of shame involved in OCD, a lot of mystery. There's kind of these in fashion psychiatric diagnosis, and OCD is certainly not one of them. So it's hiding there in the background. I think a lot of people have this experience, but before I got on this call, I'm in my kitchen, and I have my kitchen sink there, and it took me a while to close the faucet of the sink. So what is going on there? What is that? So I closed the faucet of the sink 5 or 10 times. By the time I finished doing that, my shoulders are up there, and I'm like not breathing. And I'm 64, and I'm doing that. And anybody would think I'm crazy, because everyone else can close the faucet and not have a problem. So, I've been told, just to give the package. So for people who don't know me, so my whole trauma, the expression of my trauma started with eating disorders, anorexia and bulimia. And then once kind of that was over, after 15 years, it became panic attacks and OCD. Scary stuff, OCD. Like, I thought I was going to die when I first started experiencing this in my 30s. And I would literally be sitting there. It was so scary. I remember like I wouldn't be able to watch TV with volume because so much was going on in my head talking that if the talking on the TV was on at the same time, I wouldn't even watch the TV, but I had to have the volume off. And then, of course, I have, so Stella talked before about modeling behaviors, and I was modeled to me. I mean, I had a grandmother who had severe OCD, and she would sit and I when I saw myself doing this in my 30s, I was in shock. I was like, I'm doing what my grandmother was doing, because she would sit and watch without the sound. I was a little kid. I didn't understand that. And so around, and I'd heard the psychiatrist mention OCD to me at times in my life, but I was like, no, I didn't believe that, and I never even thought about it. But in about 12 years ago, it became that, like, I wasn't able to leave the house, and I had gone through a big breakup, and I was kind of in a rock bottom place of anxiety. And at that point, I saw my then therapist suggested, you need meds. So I went to see a psychiatrist, gave me this book, OCD. This is what it's all about. And I was like, yeah, that's it. I can't close the stove, a light switch, water. I'm in like in a complete panic attack to do those normal so-called things. And he gave me this workbook, and the gold standard for OCD treatment is pills. So antidepressants. At the time, it was Paxil, which puts your whole system so half dead, half asleep. It's incredible. All I did was sleep and gain weight. I was gaining weight just standing there, like in the shower, because the system is so slowed down that, yeah, you're not feeling the anxiety or the cause of the anxiety. You're just farther away from any notion of the cause of the core of what is happening. And then the other is what do they call that? Behavior therapy. So yeah, behavior modification therapy. So those things. So yeah, so for all of these assorted things, I have taken many of the psychotropic meds. I don't think that's what they call them. Anyway, I don't remember. Anyway, the SSRIs, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what I thought. And I've done so much research in my life because it's so mysterious. I mean, for people who don't have OCD or don't have OCD, I call it OCD behaviors rather than OCD because I don't believe it's a diagnosis or a label. But for people who experience that, it's so mysterious. It's like, why can't I just be, quotes, normal? Like, why am I doing this? Like, and, you're looking at everything. I've looked at so many different types of research and techniques and plant medicines or all kinds of different things. And, invariably what you find is all these studies on how the brain is functioning. And that all these studies about people with OCD, that their brains work in a different way. They have carved out different routes or different brain chemistry. And when you read that and you feel that, well, my brain's different, then I guess I have to suffer like this for the rest of my life. There's no way out, is what you figure. And what I've found, which is so incredible is that it's not so. So that's why I say what you think, what they tell you OCD is, that's not what it is. That's my opinion from my own experience. So what I've discovered through WEL-Systems, being in the last year and a half, is that OCD is a nervous system in insane, hysterical overload fear. You're so afraid, and your nervous system you've been so terrified for such a long time for legitimate reasons, and that your nervous system is just like out of control overload fear. So you never feel safe To me, that's what it is. You never feel safe. So nobody these days who has OCD behaviors is told that, or even is encouraged to listen to what the body's saying and take a moment and integrate the fact that, like even recently, I had an experience where, like, because I've had huge, people with OCD behavior don't sleep well. It's notorious. I've been on so many websites of, like, the whole story about sleeping. So thousands of nights of my life, I didn't literally not sleep. And at some point, I was actually with Stella, and we realized that every night when I go to bed, I am right there, even after 64 years of living on this planet. I am right there at 2 years old, at 3 years old, at 4 years old, going to sleep at night in a terrifying environment. I'm right back there. And that's what I'm living. And it's so automatic. It's so in my nervous system. So basically what the miracle in the last year and a half for me with coaching with WEL-Systems and the programs is that Stella said it actually on the last interview, calibrating the nervous system for safety. And I was like, what? Calibrating the nervous system for safety? Like, oh my God. I had no calibration in my nervous system for safety. And that's what's happened. So that now the safety part is so legitimately there that when all the fear comes, I'm able to see something else or feel something else, to, like, as I talked about it last time, hear the silence that's there in the background, which is, the essence of who we are, and choose that. So it's been a long road to be able to do that. And I'll say to anybody out there who has OCD type behaviors, yes, it felt always impossible to do. Because it's big. Yeah.
Thank you, Randi. Wow, what a start. It's like all my questions, you already went through it. So that's pretty awesome. So I wrote down here a couple of thoughts as you were speaking that came up for me. And I want to ask you a question at the end of that. So, you're talking about SSRIs, which are systemic. So they take your whole system, right? Your nervous system, your digestive system, your, like, body, mind, spirit, and, like, slow it down in an effort to not feel so pulled up and out of your body. So thank you for speaking to that, and to the fact that this is a strategic behavioral response in order to seek to control and feel safe in your body. So if I can sufficiently manage to, I don't have OCD, I haven't had these kinds of experiences, but I can understand the sensation of, if I can manage this thing, right? Okay, if I can make sure this thing is right, then somehow inside my being, I feel more right? Like I feel a little bit safer. But that just doesn't happen when you're changing your behavior. So it's like, when we think about the structure of thought and logical levels, and I'll link to that here, it's like, you cannot meet a behavioral strategic response disorder, call it what you want to call it, at that level. So behavior therapy, and I've been through that myself for addiction, and it's like, I can't count how many joints I've smoked. I already know I smoke too much. So, like, you can't tell me to walk backwards. And I swear these were actual legitimate things that counselors would ask me to do. Like, take 10 steps backwards. And it's like, are you kidding me? I could punch through a wall and you're telling me to walk backwards. And none of it addresses what you called the root issues. None of it goes right into that deeply wounded space where fear lives, right? It's like, we will do anything to avoid going to the very place that needs that TLC, that needs that tender loving care, in order to actually be nourished and held and grown up, right? So there you are, 64 years old, as you said, in the body of a 2-year-old, not being able to calibrate for the moment that you're in, but right back to that moment where you decided that this isn't safe, right? Like, I have got to come up with ways to actually survive this environment. So
And
I
throw something in there. The crazy thing about it, of course, is that no matter how many times you check, you ain't getting more safe. You're getting more anxious.
Exactly, because you cannot control the very thing that lives inside of you, that fear, right? So that cannot be managed.
And you're not addressing it.
And you're not addressing it. So, and then you go and seek help, and the help that's available to you is that your brain is different. Well, when you actually understand how the brain and the nervous system and the whole body is adaptable, right? Like, neurons find each other and make friends. So the more you actually reinforce a particular behavior pattern, the more your brain is going to be different, simply because that's the pathway that is familiar. So it's an interesting paradigm, right? So we're speaking to different paradigms here, because the paradigm of the medical model says there's something wrong with you, and they're looking at it from the now perspective, right? It doesn't really matter what happened in your history. In the now, you're different, and therefore there's nothing we can really do but load you up with drugs or send you to, 55-minute sessions for the rest of your life, hoping. So that didn't work, right? It's like all of these things that you tried didn't work. What I'm looking to hear from you, what I'd like to hear from you, so that people out there are able to get a sense of hope, perhaps. So you started this conversation with you were at the tap, and you closed and opened it several times. So I want you to tell us, explain in the best way you can, how is that different today than it would have been a year ago or 2 years ago? How are you different? You're engaging the same behavior, but how are you different? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say that through quantum TLC, whenever I would, and when I started to do it, it was like ridiculous, because it was like something that I needed to do constantly all day long. As much as possible, sit with the feelings. The feelings of terror and being unsafe, to sit with them and breathe. And I was recently telling somebody about the breathing, because what I found great about breathing in WEL-System coaching is that it's not like a technique you do when you're in lotus pose in a yoga. It's not even a technique, which is what I love. I mean, there are techniques offered, but it's just like, open your mouth and breathe, get air in there. That's all. Just, and I tell this story about how, I love this story about how, Sheila, in one of the group conversations, Sheila's a facilitator of WEL-Systems programs. I was in this whole anxiety rant of what if this and what if that, and I was going on and on and on, and it was pretty scary, ugly stuff, actually, and hopeless place. And she just went, like, in a loud voice, she said, she kind of commanded me, she goes, well, what if you take a breath? And I was like, oh my God. So just taking a breath is so huge. And and it's not like some, especially for somebody who has an obsessive compulsive style of thinking, well, am I doing it right? Like, they do it like this, I do it like that. No, just get air in your body. So getting air in my body more changes the nervous system. And sitting with the anxiety, the discomfort. I think that's where, like, the shifts in the nervous system start, and having an alternative, being aware of the levels of thought. So the fact that when you're in your history, you're like spinning in the same story all the time. And I often think about that these days, about higher levels of thinking and conversation. Like, what am I doing now? Where am I? Am I living my life with a am I living my life with a purpose, a higher purpose? Just in the way I'm talking, just in the way I'm breathing, the conversation I just had with somebody, like, how can I elevate all these little conversations or little daily things into something more meaningful? Or how much am I, so I'm aware more, like, what conversation I'm in, even with myself, when am I in my historical habits? So yeah, it's become for me like I often say, it's kind of a practice, like all of the things that the conversations, the WEL-System conversations that inspired me to elevate the way I think, because in quantum TLC, when you sit with your anxiety and fear and you calm yourself by breathing, you inevitably get to the root and see the root of where these things are coming from. That's kind of the, like, wow, the wow revelation. And you kind of put things together. So as I've said previously too, that's why I think this is such an interesting way to live, because you're practicing things that are similar to any kind of religious tradition, like mystical religious tradition or spirituality, but at the same time you're gaining insight into history, habits, and so-called things that you learn in therapy. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's very powerful, the combo. Yeah.
Thank you, Randi. Yeah. So it's like, it's a mystery school married with the most cutting edge science, married with the birthing of the paradigm from experience, right? So it's like Louise Lebrun, the founder of WEL-Systems, created this body of knowledge out of an experience that she had that transformed her life. And then she spent the next 30 years seeking to understand what had happened. And in an effort, so a lot of us are conditioned to think about our mind fixing a problem, right? Like we can think it through, we can logic our way through, we can talk about it, we can, through talk therapy, for example, we can get to the root of it. I mean, that has not been my experience. That is not your experience. And I have talked to countless women that it hasn't been their experience. But when you actually stay and you surrender, not necessarily to be taken with the anxiety and how awful my life is, right? Like that's not what quantum TLC is. It is a moment of reclamation. It is a moment of recognition of everything you've spoken about the body holding messages, about the intellect being unable to keep up, about the power of breath, because anybody that is caught in a particular dynamic inside themselves is not breathing, right? Or they're breathing in a particular breath pattern. So whether that's an earth breath and it's depressive, or an air breath and it makes them more anxious, or whether that's, if you're in a water breath, you're going to find equilibrium inside yourself. So that's not going to happen. And if you're in a fire breath, well, then you're a lot of energy, moving. So breathing is key, and it's not a strategy. It is quite literally if I'm not breathing, I'm not alive. And if I'm not breathing, there's no life force moving through my body. And if there's no life force moving through my body, well, then I'm dead. And there's lots of different ways to die. So I really appreciate it. And the way that I wrote it down is this awareness as practice, right? To be mindful and intentional in your moment, every single waking moment, every single breath, it's effortful. That's why this is not an easy way to adopt, because going to the habit is easy, right? You don't want it. It is awful. It feels god awful. And, you're trained to be a victim to it as per everything in our culture, including the medical system. And so it's very easy to stay in that victim mentality where, poor me, like, why is this happening to me? And, I wish it was different, but I guess I'm stuck with it. And all that sort of stuff that we all experience, on a plethora of scales, because that's how we're conditioned to think. So to actually adopt mindful awareness in your day-to-day living, and to be, for example, and I don't know, maybe you can speak a bit to this, right? Like to be in front of that tap, right? Because I'm looking in that moment to know that I may repeat the behavior, but I am not that, right? Like I am not a victim to my life, and I am not the OCD or fill in the blank, right? So it could be addiction, for example, for me, or whatever else. I am not that thing, right? So it's a higher order expression of knowing myself while engaging a particular behavior.
Yeah, sometimes I think, like, am I really healing myself if I'm still doing these things, But I guess as I move more to live in a higher order, and then that will naturally lessen, which it already has a lot. Plus, I actually am able to sleep, which is like a massive thing because that caused me severe suffering in my life. That sleeping thing was like, and it's interesting, like, because I realized, like, first of all, through my WEL-Systems journey, I've realized that things happened to me and to my body that I'm not even really aware of, that made me legitimately terrified, and that the body, and that I respect that and I don't judge it, and that I was modeled in my family this kind of behaviors anyway, but and that this isn't the intelligent way to cope with it since I'm a child, and so that's a whole different way of looking at it from what I was ever told in therapy or in psychiatry by psychiatrists, or really, like, the diagnosis is, and the way one is treated with this kind of behaviors is shame and hopelessness is the big one. It's like, and I've read all kinds of people's blogs on OCD and what they're living. It's a fucking living hell. Like, really, like a prison that people don't understand what kind of thing that is. That there's no place to move. Yeah, it's like and you feel like it's a life sentence. You might as well be dead, kind of thing. It's a horror story, and yeah. So I think acknowledging or allowing, that it was a lot for me to shed the "you're fucked up, you're not normal, you're sick, and you'll always be that way." And even I saw myself, like, it's almost like, that there's the beliefs, values, and attitudes thing. I mean, all the voices that say, "You're no good, you're no good, you're no good, you'll never be any good." And I mean, that came from legitimate places and spaces when, in childhood. And that's therefore honoring and not judging how the person that I've become as a result of the beliefs, values, and attitudes that I learned, to the point that when I'm standing there locking a door, and I lock it a couple of times and I start getting anxious, there's a voice inside of me that goes, "You see, you're not normal. You see, you're no good." It's always like a technique to somewhere where I learned that I was no good, and I learned it through stuff that happened to me when I was a child, and then there's some adoption of behaviors that confirm it to me, whether it's eating disorders, panic, or whatever. You see, you're different, you'll never be normal, who's ever going to love you, you're no good. And that's all this the heaviness of the belief, values, and attitude package, the voices of people in my own history. Everybody has that were not life affirming, rather the opposite. So yeah, it's a gradual, like what I spoke to before about practicing and honoring. When I raised my, like I talked before about looking up, and like if I'm checking the door a bunch of times, well, first of all, it's a lot less than before, and I'm not getting as anxious. And then I will look up and hear the silence and go, I'm not that. And it's okay. So that's how in my life I'm moving away from those beliefs, values, and attitudes and those behaviors. But it's been a long road. And I would never have thought, I stopped taking SSRIs maybe only 4 years ago or something because in order to I wanted to do plant medicine, at that time you had to be off of them. So I knew that, it takes you farther away from the truth of that's inside of you. Yeah. I always had that faith that there's something inside that, but I wasn't looking and I wasn't honoring. I was just in a lot of shame, a lot of I'm so not normal stuff. That's a heavy thing with OCD behavior. Yeah. And still now, I'm actually quite amazed. It was a major revelation to me. Now when I look at people or I read stuff about people with OCD, I'm like, are you really listening to what's going on inside the core of this anxiety? And and then something else that I realized too is that a nervous system is inherited too. There's anxiety, like epigenetics. There's the things that happen to our ancestors or grandparents or whatever is living inside of us also. So what I like also is that I don't need to have a memory or words. I don't need to know where it came from. I just need to pay attention and allow and not stop telling my body to shut up, when it's doing whatever it's doing, like actually witnessing, being there and honoring it. That's a huge shift. Yeah.
It's a paradigm shift, right? It's a mindset shift, because nobody ever tells us to honor the messages of the body. Most women, if not, let's go with most, they feel betrayed by their body, right? Like they think their body is the problem. They think there's something wrong with them. They think it's their fault. They think all the things that you spoke to just now. And two of us can sit here living proof that there's a different way to live. And when you engage this different way to live that's reliable and replicable, a scientific method to actually apply into your daily moment-to-moment living, you can become so much more than the cultural conditioning that has taught you to be small, to be victim. And the truth of it is, you and I both know the depths of where we've had to go, right? Like the depths of the dark spaces inside ourselves that we've had to go in order to be to notice that there's light there, right? Like that terrified 2, 3, 4-year-old that's quote unquote sabotaging is not actually doing that, is seeking to get attention, and is seeking to get attention in the way that she knows how, in terms of awakening vibrations in the body that are there to get your attention. So if I don't know that my body is giving me a message, if I don't know that there's a process to decode those messages, if I don't understand that the logical levels allow me to expand my context so that I can notice what's going on in my body differently, and if I don't know how to apply a different process than the habit, basically I'm stuck. I'm trapped in the story of the same old repeating, and then blaming my history for it, blaming my genetics for it, blaming all of this sort of stuff. The truth of it is that we can transform our neurology, right? And we can do it fast. So you're 64 years old and you're speaking to this journey that you've taken in your life, and yet you and I have known each other for the last year and a half. So
it's so beautiful what you're saying, Stella. Seriously, it's so incredibly brilliant.
it's like it works. It just really works. And when you stay in it, right? When you notice that the voices that come up are not are intelligent voices on one hand, and are also voices that have been habituated in your nervous system, right? So like I wrote a blog post recently about eating bread, and as I'm spreading the margarine and I'm like rushing to actually do it so that like I hide my shame from anybody watching, and I realized, whoa, pause, right? But just push the pause button. Go inside the base of my spine. Breathe, bitch. Like just breathe, And then I noticed, whose voice is that? Right? It's like my nervous system is doing the thing, but whose voice is that and what is it seeking to do? Well, it's my father's voice seeking to shame me into eating well, or what he would consider well. So it's like, in that having slowed down, I gave myself the opportunity to expand time and space, to notice that I'm not a victim to this voice, nor do I have to rush my eating and, not be able to digest and all the stuff that comes up from that, but I could just pause.
So that's a perfect example of QTLC.
Exactly. Because that's what
living
it is.
on that way.
Exactly. Because we make the mistake of believing that that's who we are, right? Like we hear the voice and we hear the stuff and it's familiar, and we make the mistake of believing that that's who we are. But that's what decloaking is about, to begin to notice that, okay, there's a lot of stories that run here that may not be mine. Engaging and awakening others is about, well, yeah, that's true. Whose voices are those? Whose stories are those? Right? So like noticing that they are not necessarily mine, and I don't have to hang on to them anymore. And everything I know intuitively is legitimate. And then manifesting connects you to that deeper essence of your being, which is what I think we're all hungering for, right? Like that's the disconnect. So the more quote unquote diseased I felt, so I won't speak about everybody, but I mean, I work with women, the more diseased I felt, the more existential and disconnected I felt. So the notion of a meaningful life was like, what for? Like, what is this that you're speaking to? It's not a thing, right? But it is a thing. It absolutely is a thing, and it is possible. And we can, through our choices, claim it. So,
what a great nutshell description of this paradigm. Amazing. It's just like, I feel moved to tears when I hear what you do, everything that you just said, and it hasn't been a long time since we've known each other, but we are all so capable of living such beautiful lives, and I think that's what's meant. And I thank God that this paradigm came into my life. Yeah.
So maybe we can end this call with this phrase, because it really came to me, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. What it looks like, what life looks like. So, once you at least listen to the decloaking audio files and potentially be in decloaking, you learn that you can live through calibrating for difference. So in order to individuate, right, from your family systems, from your culture, from your dogmatic, internalized ways of moving through the world, you've got to be willing to calibrate for difference. So things like, it took 1.5 years for us to have this conversation, and I hear no shame in you in talking about it. Right? There's no hiding. You're visible, you're vocal, and it's the truth of your experience owned. As opposed to calibrating for sameness. Right? So calibrating for all the ways it has always been, and the family systems and all that sort of stuff. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and how that's made a difference for you.
Well, it's something I obviously grew into through practice, and it's a freedom. It's a difference between prison and freedom for me. Literally.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it totally. Yeah, it's I'm completely amazed at the way I live my life now, Stella, quite honestly. I really, how can I say, it's what I dreamed my life could be. And even when I speak to people, like the last, this interview that we did, I said to myself, and it's kind of, it's a whole kind of circle evolution, to be able to speak my truth now is also incredibly healing. Like, I thought, I listened to my video and I was like, it's so weird listening to your own voice, and like, how could what I have to say like that possibly have any big meaning for anybody? But somebody I know who I shared it with told me that it really like rocked his world and made him realize and think about a lot of things. And I've just been like so amazed by that. It's such a great feeling. So this speaking about anyway, to your question, it really is like prison to freedom, really. And it's possible. It's really possible. It's really possible when you address the truth rather than running, like masking it, and accepting that you're small and that you're not normal and that you'll always be that way in this kind of pain. I think that like it's been a long time coming for me to talk about this subject because it's so hidden and there's so much shame and so much pain. So I love the fact that maybe people will look at this in a different way. These kind of behaviors.
And you're the one, right? So like you have discovered something that allowed you to move from that trajectory of never ending pain, right? And you've discovered something that allows you to live differently. So there's moments of pain, but it's not all of it, right? Like there's so much more.
And one of the things that I mentioned it briefly before that I find really, it took me a while to grab this, is the not having to have literal memories of things, but rather just honoring what the message is coming from the body. But that's the truth. The truth is the terror, what you're living, and the way, the habits you learn to cope with it, and learning that you're more than that, but not needing only to honor what you feel inside the body.
It's a foreign concept to most people.
Yeah, it took me a while, like I say, to grab that, because that's the living in this small corner of what we're capable of as human beings. That's the living there in judgment and believing that we're worthless and small and all these crazy things.
As you're saying that, I have in front of me, when the horse dies, get off and stop dragging it around.
The best title.
It really is, because it's like all the places and spaces where we learned how to be small, how to carry dead horses around, right? And it's like seeking to breathe life into them, and it's like they're gone. So that's not, so that's, it's, I really appreciate that you are now there, right? Like I really appreciate that you now know the power of the messages of the body. So may not always like it. I mean, I sure don't, particularly when it comes to issues of feeling abandoned, right? Like feeling that sensation of like fear of being left out, or, fear fundamentally boils down to fear for most of us. Like we want to belong, we want to be part of, and everything makes it such that We don't. Right. So we've got to find ways to belong to ourselves. And you and I have discovered this path, and we know that it works, and we've seen it with, countless other women over 30 years. So, and it's not for everybody because it takes immense courage, right? To delve in and no longer seek to avoid, but actually confront.
Yeah, courage is the word.
Yep. Yes.
Yep.
And the more you feed it, it's like a muscle. The more you feed it and nourish it, the more it grows, right? So I think that that's fabulous, right? It's true and it's fabulous. Thank you so much, Randi. Let's do it again. I don't know what it'll be on next time, but I love talking to you and about your evolution because you are, Louise will talk about a thought virus, right? So like the more we actually unfurl and the more we're willing to be visible and audible as powerful women living our lives and shaping reality, I mean, it's a force to be reckoned with. So I want to cultivate that as much as possible. And I want it to be public in such a way that empowers. So I really am grateful to your willingness to actually go there.
That
such vulnerable. Yeah. So thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Any final words for you?
Prison versus freedom. Final words. That's my final word.
It is a choice.
I felt that way, but I didn't really say it, or maybe I have said it inside of me, the choice part. But, when you're so overrun by a nervous system that's terrified, you don't feel like you have the choice, but you can learn to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Randi.
Okay.
I hope you have a spectacular day. And
you too. Thank you so much, Stella. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time coming, this conversation.
How does it feel now having done it?
Amazing. It feels like the beginning. Let's see where it leads us.
Thank you, Randi.
Thanks, Stella.
Oh.